This is Ron Yengich, and I'm looking for John Saltas. He's not here. I'm here at the Salt Lake Community College, and I'm with Professor Craig Watson, who is a professor of criminal justice and police tactics and such at Salt Lake Community College. He is also a dear friend of mine, an investigator that I used until I retired and still bother him with issues that come up. And good morning, Craig. How are you doing?
Good. Nice to be here.
John Saltas is supposed to be here. Wait a minute. There's the phone. John?
Hey, Ron, it is me. I can hear you. Could you not hear me? I wasn't on mute. I must
No.
have been that tin phone line I was on.
It must have been either that or its operator error, as usual. John, where are you?
I'm at 2122 North Clark Street in Chicago.
You are.
1929. I did my time loop here.
You did it.
I did.
It's amazing. You've been in Chicago before with the woman with the red dress, as I recall.
That's true. When she did the thing over there with John Dillinger, she was not a red dress, right? We found out she was a really loud orange dress or something like that.
Yeah.
You couldn't make a song out of that, though, nor a good rhyme. Nothing rhymes with orange.
No, except asshole. But anyway.
You're predicting the future. Yeah. Okay.
But anyway, so you've got me on this one, John.
2122 North Clark Street, just a block or two south of a few blocks south of where I used to live on Diversey and Clark. Near Diversey and Clark, people are familiar. That's the West Lincoln Park area of Chicago. And it's Valentine's Day, 1929.
Okay.
And there's a bunch of gangster types lying in a pool of blood and mayhem. They got machine gunned down last night, Ron.
Yes, I seem to remember that from history.
St. Valentine's Day Massacre.
Right.
And Valentine's Day is right around the corner.
And that's where you are. You're celebrating the massacre?
No, I'm not celebrating. I'm aghast because these guys went in disguised as policemen. A good portion of them. And I think because they went as policemen with the honorable badge and the word police on there, the other beer runners of the time, bootleggers, just said, hey, yeah, come on in, we'll have a beer. And that's when they opened fire.
Well,
Bugsy, was it Bugsy? Yeah, Bugsy Malone and all the gang just kind of turned it over. Al Capone takes over.
Yeah. So are you relating that, which I would, to the fact that there are actual law enforcement that sometimes do the same, similar things, at least, not massacres.
I don't know that they do it in how it's, yes, they do. Okay, but here's what it is when we see, we're programmed to see somebody who is, we believe to be to our aid or benefit or mentor or, trust. And usually that's a badge. It could be a hat. It could be the simple word police, which we can later on talk about where that word came from. But once we see someone of trust, we certainly don't anticipate that they're going to behave in an ill manner by just machine gunning people down, or in a modern day case, because I can also see where you are in the future, bonk somebody on the head and shoot them through the side of a barely moving car and kill a woman and knock a guy down dead in Minneapolis. And isn't that the American city where this is happening now?
Yeah, it is. But you know what? You make a point, and Craig will bring you into it right now, but there is a point that I learned as a criminal defense lawyer a long time ago. Even the people that are, in a sense, at war with police, and I'm talking about gang members. I mean, because there's in those days, the Cosa Nostra, and in this day and age, the cartel gangs. There is a sense that when you see a police officer and they identify themselves as such, you look at them and you go, there are rules that they have to play by. I mean, and I have represented a lot of people that were known to be bad guys, okay? Not most of the people I represented, but some of them. But most of them were prepared to acquiesce to that badge, and Craig can talk about this even more, his observations of it, because they understood that there were guidelines that they had to do. And if they complied with what they were requested to do or ordered to do, that things would go okay with them. And so I found it interesting because those same people who would tell me about how much they hated what police were doing to them still showed up to court, didn't jump bail. They showed up, they went to trial, or they pled, and they were sentenced. and some of them were whisked away. And there was a respect factor for the law, even amongst those people. So,
right. Just before, and Craig, nice to meet you. That's exactly it. So, like, we want to believe, that Andy is a good guy.
Right.
We want to believe all of the, the Western cops that shot the bad guys, went after him, or they were good guys. And there's nothing wrong with that. I have 3 or 4 cousins and relatives, old former brother-in-law, that were seriously good cops in this valley. One at a chief of police in one of our metropolitan cities in Salt Lake Valley. So, this isn't about good cop, bad cop per se. It's about how law enforcement, there's people using this term, I think, way too loosely. What is law enforcement, and what others are using that utility of outfit, uniform, and it's deceptive. You said, like there was a time when the cartels or the drug guys or the Al Capones, they had a war with the cops. Citizens didn't till recently. People aren't fighting the cops right now. They're fighting this idea that a gendarme could be created, beat the shit out of people. And that's what's going on.
Let's go to Craig, and let me introduce you. And Craig Watson was with the county sheriff's office.
Yep.
Worked was investigator with the district attorney's office. Did you work with the city PD?
Nope.
But he worked in a drug task force. Craig's done pretty much what you can do as an officer. He's extremely well respected by everybody that knows him. He also did something that he and I've talked about a lot, because Craig was my investigator for quite a while, and I've told him this, and I've told a lot of other people. I had great investigators, but the 2 final investigators in my career were a guy named Jeff Wright, who was a longtime police officer and then worked at the Attorney General's office, and Craig Watson. And that isn't to demean any of the other people that worked for me. And I always believed in having investigators. Nobody I've ever dealt with an attorney-investigator relationship is better than Craig Watson. He is a great investigator. And he was known as such when he was a police officer and when he worked for the DA's office. But one of the things Craig did at the DA's office was he was involved in investigating complaints against cops, police officers, by the DA's office, and also was in charge of doing, I think, most of the officer shootings for quite a while at the DA's office. And he knows more about that than anybody. So to get to your point and just get going with this, so what's your observation about how when you were a cop or when you worked at the DA's office, Craig was also a criminal defense investigator for quite a while as well, but what's your observation about how we are now and how it was being a police officer and the respect that you would receive from people?
Wow, loaded question.
Yeah.
No, just before I get into that, thanks for the accolades, and also just want to make a small correction. I was at the DA's office for 14 years. And most of that time, whenever there was a call for an officer-involved shooting or somebody died in police custody, it was my phone that rang in the middle of the night to get an investigation going. I did go out on many of those investigations, and I participated in a lot of those investigations, but it was involved in the screening process to review all of those cases. Okay. So that's kind of how my involvement worked with those.
Because we're going to get to that. And one of the things is that is something where you had to know the protocols that were involved and what the law was and what self-defense was and what the defense of an officer was and when a gun should be used and things like that. And so we'll get into that because you bring an experience, and I really mean this. I don't think anybody in the state of Utah has more experience in that than you do, because you were in the biggest county working for the biggest prosecutor's office in the state, and you did that. So, but to get back to the other question, so what was your observation about when you were a cop and you arrested people and how you were treated, and whether or not there was a measure of respect and not just fear of you being a police officer that was doing your job?
Yeah, and there's a fine distinction between what's respect and what's, fear, intimidation or whatever. So I think that my experience was primarily that folks, there was a built-in trust. I think John mentioned it earlier in a different form, but there's a historical trust between the badge and the uniform and the public.
Right.
And it's important because without it, it all fails. And the trust can be lost really quickly and takes years to gain. And one of the things that happens in policing and communities is that unfairly, and the public does this, community does this in a variety of different ways, but it also works with police. If a police officer does something bad, inappropriate, or illegal, it makes the news, as it should.
Right.
And everybody is aware of it. But the mistake that we tend to make as a community is we then apply what an individual officer does to the entire group. It's a form of discrimination. When there's a lot of cops out there who are good people, try to do the right thing all of the time, they've done the things they need to do to earn the public trust, but then you get what might be called a bad apple or two that get all the attention, and then everything is applied across the board. That's one issue with trust that really is hard to overcome.
We talked about this, and that's why you're here today, because John asked me some questions about representing police officers, and particularly in regards to what's happened in Minneapolis, which we're going to get to. But this is what lawyers call setting the foundation for those type of things. About how I felt about that and some of those things, and it gets to this point. A long time ago, when I was a public defender, there were two really good homicide detectives, and they were so fair and so honorable and so decent. They were really hard to go up against. And I asked one of those guys one time about that, and he said, "Look, we wear the badge, and behind the badge is not me. Behind the badge, in my judgment, is the law. I've got to follow the law, just like I'm expecting people that I'm arresting to follow the law. And so I'm going to comply with that because I think that's my obligation. That's, in a sense, my calling, my vocation to do that." And he also said, the other thing, Ron, is if I'm good to people that I arrest and I treat them with respect and honor, and I don't use power, I try to use persuasion at the beginning. And I'm summarizing what he told me because we talked about this for about an hour and a half. He said, I know that the next time that they come and they meet a cop, or when they go home and talk to their family about a cop, I haven't made any enemies for police work. In fact, I may have reinforced what people think. And he made this point, which has always stayed with me, and that is, when I deal with cops that do bad stuff and they use their power to scare people, or they overstep their bounds as an officer in arresting someone, I know that now that person hates them. Their mom and dad hate the police. Their brother and sister, their cousins, everybody that they know. That cop has just made anywhere between 5 and 20 members of the public not like the police. And it really struck me that likely is true. So going to that, when police officers are trained, are all police forces trained the same way?
Well, there's not a national police, so every state has their own what we call post peace officer standards and training. In Utah, they're all trained the same, and many states have similar training criteria and protocols in place for police, where they're trained the basics of their job, and they're taught the state law and some federal law, and tactics and police tactics on how to stay safe. I think one of the things that stands out for me when I went through the police academy, and I'm sure it's probably similar in many states and in many ways, is that when you leave the police academy as a rookie police officer, oftentimes you are in fear,
right,
because of the police academy. In other words, they teach you that you need to be afraid for your life and be ready for in an instant that something could happen that requires deadly force at any time. And they show you videos of cops getting shot. They show you videos of bad people, gangsters doing shootings and things like this, repeatedly over and over, how cops get killed. They have what they used to call the 7 deadly sins, and now call it the 10 deadly sins. But the one that's the most important, and the one that they cram into your mind the most, and it is important, is to be wary of a person's hands.
Okay.
So if a police officer can't see your hands, that's a big pucker factor for them. And it gets them in a state of heightened alert. So that could be the hands behind the back, the hands in the pocket, the hands underneath the seat. Anytime they can't see the hands, it's instinctual, it's trained, it's whatever you want to call it, but it's embedded into their brain that you need to be afraid.
That's fair in a way. I mean, that's fair.
It's conditioning based on the idea that if you don't prepare for the worst moment of your career and train for it and be ready for it, that it will cost you your life if you don't respond appropriately when you have a second or two to make a decision.
Okay.
That's the premise. So the reality is, you probably don't know the answer to this, maybe you do. How many times, on average, nationwide, in a 20-year career, does a police officer fire their weapon?
Well, I bet it's close to zero.
It is.
Yeah.
It's less than one.
Yeah, I mean, even if you feel like you need to, I think from my experience, I mentioned I have had many my life, friends, neighbors, relatives, members of the police force, and at all levels. They didn't shoot their weapons, and none of them did, as far as I know. And that's not, I'm not saying congratulatorily that way, but they can all tell you the time they almost did,
Right.
and they didn't, because they're also human beings that say, man, I'm about to alter. You said 5 or 20. I think it's higher than that many lives if I pull this trigger. And they're not, I think if it comes to it, if any of them had, I can't speak for them, push or shove, somebody's going to shoot first. I think they probably would have, but they didn't. And I'm one of those that have always believed all cops are good cops until that one isn't. And then you just deal with that one, but you don't brand all cops. And this is where, for me, and I know we'll get there in a minute, to me it's problematic because I don't look at the current situation of people with the ICE uniform as being my endearment of law enforcement.
Well,
They're masked and they're scaring people. They're the opposite of what Craig just said.
Right.
We're going to jump to that, but I think, again, we're kind of laying the foundation. I mean, I've known lots of officers that I've talked to that have had 20, 30-year careers, and I've asked the question, do you ever have to pull your gun? And most of them say, no, I never even had to pull the gun, let alone shoot it. But the other thing is that, and I'm playing a little bit of devil's advocate here, this is a different world today. I think that we live in a different place right now in some sense. There is so much talk about violence, and we've changed our attitude to a degree about it, and it's in everybody's face all the time, in movies and discussion and the politics about the violence. You're a cop, and now you're out of training, and you've been a patrolman for a while. Does that change where you aren't afraid all the time, or is that something that is continually part of what you're doing as you become an officer and you actually have done it for a while?
Well, for me personally,
Yeah.
I had the good fortune of having somebody, and I don't even remember who it was, come and be a guest speaker in my police academy course. That I hated his warning about what is referred to as the indoctrination process into policing, and the 5-year mark that a police officer hits in their career where they have become a different person. And that once you have about 5 years in and you go through the peer pressure, the training, have some critical event or get involved in some major event or arrest or something, once you've been in that for 5 years, it changes who you are to the point where if you leave, you can never go back and be who you were before.
Really?
Yeah, that's not possible.
Do you believe that?
Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
Okay. Years ago, I read an FBI report, and this was about police officers that work undercover, and it said that they recommended that nobody work undercover as a police officer for over a year at the maximum. And that was kind of the point there, that once you worked undercover, particularly relative to drugs, but anything, then you are changed dramatically, and you may not even be able to go back and be a patrolman again because
Right.
of what has changed. So that's kind of the same thing.
Yeah.
So
I worked undercover for 8 months in drugs, by the way.
I know you did.
But the point that I was making is that because of that notice and that awareness, I was very careful about not going over the line.
Okay.
Right? And I think that helped me be more equal, if you will, in my thinking and my projection over my career.
Right.
And to not let it take over my life.
So when we talk about this stuff, and we talk about, I mean, let's get to the elephant in the room, pun fully intended, because of the GOP. Let's talk about ICE. But most training for police officers that are coming into the academy is approximately the same. But when we go into specialized units, I mean, because there are specialized police units. There are federal officers that do specific things. There are state officers that do specific things. But generally, you're a police officer, and ask the general question, do all police officers, the Salt Lake City cops, think that highway patrolmen and county sheriffs and everybody is the same? Or is there a feeling that some are better or not? Do you want support from some you don't want from others? Does that happen?
There's rivalries. There's turf protection. There's political involvement. Things like that have an impact on how police interact with one another interagency-wise. But generally speaking, there's very good cooperation between local and federal police here in Utah, at least. Or at least there has been. And as far as ICE goes, I haven't seen any big operations like we've seen in Minneapolis here, but I think that there's generally a good concept of cooperation, or a good practice of cooperation, and all police, as far as the state goes, are trained the same through the police academy. But once you get assigned somewhere, after patrol, post patrol, let's say, if you're in a larger department, homicide, sex crimes, fraud, whatever it is, you're going to start getting training, because you have to have 40 hours a year in service training. You're going to start getting training geared towards that specific task.
So when you see ICE wearing masks as a police officer, in reading and about the years ago about the mafia, the prosecutors who prosecuted the mafia in Italy, some really wonderful books written about them, because they started killing judges and police officers. So these books were written about what they did, and the need for a lot of those officers to actually have mask covers on when they went to arrest people, stuff like that. I could understand that there. When you see what's going on in America today, where every officer that works for ICE, for example, is wearing a mask. As a cop, what's your initial thought about that?
I don't like it, and I think it's disgusting. I think, to me, it says the things that I'm doing, I need to be ashamed of, and I don't want people to know who I am.
Okay.
That's one thing it could say. The other thing it could say is, if people do know who I am, they might come after. I might have some retaliation against me and my family. So I need to protect myself and my family by covering my face, so people can't use facial recognition, figure out who I am, and harass my family or come to my house. But the problem with that is, if you have this trust we talked about earlier, and you're doing something decent and fair, then you don't need to worry about that. So what we have, in my opinion, here is a circumstance and a situation where it's not what officers are doing so much as how they're doing it. Okay. It's fine if you want to enforce the law, immigration, and deport people who are here illegally, fine, do it. But the way they're doing it, that's where the shame comes in, and that's where the mask comes in.
Well, it's like the two words you used were trust and fear, right? And I grew up trusting, and there's no doubt about it. Sometimes if you did something borderline wrong, or maybe you shouldn't have been somewhere, you see the guy come by in a uniform or a siren, you get scared right away before you trust. But what's happening in Minneapolis is going to destroy both trust and fear among citizens for anybody to trust that uniform again. Any uniform is the way I look at it. It's not just take the mask off in the future. You let this continue. Take the masks off and just say the word police anymore, and it's going to be like, uh-oh. run for cover.
Right.
And that goes away from like, hey, I need you right now because there's some violence happening in my house. You may not even want to approach that cop to end the violence because you're afraid of what the cop would do. That's what's happening. We're becoming fearful of that arm. That arm is an artificial, I just don't see it as pure law enforcement. And I know some law enforcement people say, yeah, we're all on the same team, but there are many others that are kind of going, no freaking way. That's not how we behave. That's not how you do things.
Well, do you think all cops are on the same team with what ICE is doing?
No, I don't. And there's many chiefs that have made it clear through public statements that they're not either. I think one of the things that's bad for local police is that these federal agents, ICE agents and Homeland Security agents in particular, that are out doing these operations where they're taking 10 or 15 guys that look like a military unit to arrest one guy.
Okay.
That's in a coffee shop.
Well,
I can tell you that I could go get that guy under arrest by myself.
Right.
Exactly. So like
with no uniform.
So like the other day, the president said, "Oh, these Somalis, and this is just what it is today in Minneapolis. It's going to be the Mexicans in Denver. It's going to be the Germans in Pittsburgh. And in the next issue of the next ICE and bar and engagement, but all these Somalis have taken hundreds of millions of dollars in fraud from us, right? Send them all back home. They're all driving Mercedes-Benz. Now, if I'm a cop, I just look around for Mercedes-Benz driven by black people,
right, and
take a look at it. But that's not what they're doing. And by the way, that's a big bullshit lie.
Of course.
So forget that part that it's even true. It's not true. But assuming it was, then why are you going into coffee shops, donut shops, kids' schools, into courtrooms when people are processing legally with masks on and saying the things that they're saying and doing and beating the crap out of people? That is not law enforcement. That's abuse. That's authoritarianism. That's hurting us. And it's going to hurt our cops. It's going to hurt all of us. And I don't get it. How you're right. I've seen some chiefs stand up. I've seen individual police guys stand up. I've seen National Guard guys stand up. But this ICE group. By the way, we've had ICE for how long?
Well,
they were doing this
around forever.
But this new behavior is a new behavior.
Well,
it's
well, they don't train federal Border Patrol agents don't train to be inner city on the street cops. They have a whole different kind of training.
Or they'd recognize the Mercedes with the Somalian driving it.
Well, and what they're doing though, if you look at some of the photographs and the video of their military appearance, is that on the back it might say ICE, but underneath it says police.
Right.
So they're usurping the trust from the local police to come in as a gang of thugs and mistreat people and make a big scene. That's why everybody is wearing whistles and knows where they are, is because they're making it so obvious. And that's part of the process that I think that that is designed. It's designed to do that for intimidation. But you don't need to create that big scene in the first place to go arrest a single individual.
Well, that means
they're not getting the hard criminals.
All right, but so in a sense, what you're saying is that's not how police normally work.
No.
Okay, and what this really is to a degree with ICE that we don't talk about in these terms. This is performance art. This is a performance. They sent 12 people to arrest Don Lemon, who said that he will surrender, and the judges said, don't go arrest him. You don't need to arrest him. They send 12 people not because they're really afraid of Don Lemon, but they want to make a show, and who are they doing the show for, Craig, in your judgment? Who is this show for?
Well, the agents, let's look at the FBI, for instance. They have a long history of being top-notch folks, college educated, very, very thoughtful in their process.
I'm going to stun you here. When I was a kid, I thought I wanted to be an FBI agent or a Secret Service agent. That's totally true. I read 2 books about it. In the early days, you had to have a law degree or you had to have an accounting degree to be a member of the FBI. That's changed now. But anyway, but
those guys that are long-term career employees at the FBI, they don't want to just quit and walk out the door because they're being asked to do these things. There's somebody that's involved that's getting an affidavit signed from the court to go do a search, like on Lemon or make an arrest. And they're executing it because it's a lawful order from a court.
Right.
But they don't need to do it the way they're doing it. And I think that that's designed to produce fear, intimidation, and to send a message to other, like anybody who might want to do something, whatever, like Lemon didn't do, actually.
Right.
But it's to send a message. It's a message.
I think that's true. I think it's meant to cause fear, to send a message to the public at large that we're here and we're not leaving and we're going to get you. I also think it's meant to send a message to Donald Trump. I think a lot of these things are done because Donald Trump likes them, and that is, see, we're following what you want to do. And that's where I'll ask this question, bring this up to you as a cop. You've been involved in political investigations as a police officer. I mean, where that you had to be involved in investigating people that are politicians or were politicians, and possibly go out and arrest them. Is this how political the arrest of a political person is done? I mean, is this what we do when we do politics? Or as a cop, do you have a different view of what you need to do with it? Are you do you want to be part of making a political statement if you're a police officer?
I don't think they do. But at the same time, when you're a federal officer and you don't work on the street every day like a local cop, doing felony arrests every day,
right,
doing search warrants every day, when you do one, it becomes a bigger deal. You try to I think, at least in my experience with doing search warrants with agents, DEA, FBI, and et cetera, they have a different mindset when they go to do them. It's more impactful on them because they don't do them every day. I guess there's a little bit of desensitivity that goes on if you're out doing that every day and you're not so concerned about. You can read the situation, I think, better because you do it all the time.
What I see, Ron, is there's a message, and part of it is what you said. Oh, this is to scare other people, and they won't do the same thing. Scare Don Lemon. Boy, Jim Acosta's next. He's probably been shitting his pants now. And then the next one, they won't do this stuff. That's possible. Somewhere along the line will be a decent journalist that stands up. We can get to that in a minute, but if we do. But what I also see is the messaging that says Donald Trump is doing what he said he was going to do. And therefore, you see, he's putting, because as soon as you say don't do that in Minneapolis, what do they counterback with? Oh, you like criminals. You want our money to go to shipped overseas. Oh, you're in favor of the cartels. No, that's not it at all. But it keeps that message alive. That keeps the base energized and engaged and saying, yeah, we're doing the right thing. They call it patriotism. I call it blind something. But that messaging, when they do a fake arrest like they did with Don Lemon, they've done others, the excessive violence that isn't needed to be there to pull one woman out of a car, 6 people surrounding her, forgetting the poor woman, Nicole Good, who was shot. There's been many other instances of this. It's not just designed to create fear because people aren't backing down. People's core is not to back down. What they're doing is training other people to endorse it, and they continue to endorse it.
I think
wrongly.
I think that's a great point. As a cop, if you were still a cop now, and you meet almost every Friday with some former colleagues from the police department, won't mention their names because that wouldn't be fair. You're sitting around having coffee and your old cops sitting around talking about this stuff. What's the attitude? How do people feel about it? Is it just all political, depending upon your political party, or when you talk to your former colleagues that were police officers at Friday Coffee or wherever you meet? I mean, can you believe what they're doing, or is it gung-ho, or tell me?
Well, the guys that I associate with are not very happy with what's happening on the federal level. There's one of the issues that Trump and Homeland Security folks, Christine Noem and others are claiming is they're not getting local cooperation, so they have to do it this way. They wouldn't need to do it this way if they got local cooperation.
Do you believe that?
No, I think they do get local cooperation. There may be 1 or 2 cities that are more progressive or liberal, if you want to call it that have given directives to their local police to not participate or assist in these operations. But what I'm talking about, and it hasn't changed, it's always been there, is you've got local jails that where people get booked in that don't seem to be have citizenship, and they drop a dime on Homeland Security or ICE and say, hey, I got this guy here. He's been arrested on a felony warrant. He's known to be here illegally. You want to put a federal hold on him or not? So they tip him off.
Right.
That's always happened.
Right.
That was going on when I worked out in the street. So to say that they're not getting that kind of cooperation, I find that to be probably overstated. Maybe there's one or two areas that aren't participating because of the big show that's going on. But maybe probably
the statistics I've seen show that, somebody Google this real quick or get their chat out, that there were more deportations under Obama and Biden than there ever were in either of Trump's terms. And so that's what I've read. It's just what you've said. They were already being deported. The issue that Trump put into everybody's head is the open border, Biden let them all in. Well, then stop the border thing. But don't go to Minneapolis because you're pissed off at Waltz, because you don't like Somalis. You can pick many other cities that have more crime or even more percentages of ethnic minority, legal or illegal, but they're in red states. And so now you're using this political mass of people masked to come to blue cities and attack them in the name of justice, when justice is not being served somewhere else, and in fact it's being just blindly, it's okay. The two guys, and I'd like to talk about this, because I think this is part of what we talked about because last we were talking about Alex, the guy that was shot, the last in Pretty, in Minneapolis. Was that, you've maybe educated different types of police shootings, the two guys that are allegedly have shot him, because we don't know, they're two Hispanic guys from Texas. I think one Texas, one Florida, but it doesn't matter. But not Minneapolis guys, not Minnesota.
No.
What's going on here where we can just import violence somewhere and expect it to work?
Well, talk a little bit about police shootings and about how good prosecutors and good police agencies look at them and what you do, and also when they're necessary. Talk a little bit about that in your experience.
Well, the requirements to use deadly force, or the criteria to use deadly force, are the same across the United States, and that is there must be an articulable set of facts and circumstances that lead a reasonable cop to believe there's imminent threat of serious bodily injury or death. Okay, if those factors are all present, then they kind of got the clear green light to use deadly force to protect themselves or another person. I think the big mistake in this case, or these cases, has been the almost instantaneous justification announced by the leadership of the Trump administration without having any information, no investigation. I mean, the information they have was inaccurate.
Right.
And I think they were just repeating what they'd been told. I don't think they were just making it up. I think somebody told them this. Okay, what happened? They get a report. They go run to the microphone and say, that's what happened and it's justified. Well, you can't do that. I mean, when I used to get called out in the middle of the night on an officer-involved shooting, the initial information you're getting, I can tell you, is 90% of the time not complete and it's not accurate. Then when I get to the scene and I assess it, we can make some more clear statements about it, but we still don't know what happened. And we've got to figure that out. And it takes an investigation to do that. But for them to jump in front of the microphone and say, in the case of Pretty, this guy was out to do mass massacres of police officers. They don't even know what happened.
Right.
And then when people start seeing the video, because there's multiple cameras going, and they can see it from different angles, and they don't see anything that makes them believe that there was some mass massacre of police about to happen. In fact, what you see if you look at those videos closely and from all the angles is nothing that would justify the use of deadly force.
Because he's not threatening an officer with serious bodily injury or deadly force. Holding your camera is not threatening anybody. A police officer going to arrest somebody for obstructing justice or interfering with arrest, but as I remember, I mean, the mere fact that you're a witness observing something or even filming it, if you're out of the way, is not obstruction of justice either.
Well, historically, it's been a First Amendment right to film a police officer doing what he's doing. Anybody should be able to do that.
You know, what at first Christie Noem come on, and Trump and Miller and I think Patel just flat out vilified this guy. I mean, every which way. It's not worth repeating. You know what they said all about him. You know, domestic terrorist and out to kill us and la la la. Maybe there are people like that in Minneapolis, but it wasn't that guy.
No.
But here's the thing. So like even after that, there was a whole bunch of like people like, yeah, but he was a law enforcement policeman. Then they watched the videos, and it kind of changed, and they said, well, yeah, that was not good. And you start to see the crack, and then 7 or 10 days later, there was the later video of him kicking out the tail light of a ICE
It
vehicle.
showed up later, but it was from an earlier time.
But it was from an earlier time.
Exactly. It was like a week or 10 days later, which doesn't. Then they said, see, he is violent while kicking out any kind of thing. It's not. It's probably some kind of crime or something stupid, but it's certainly not to the
criminal
level.
mischief.
It's a criminal
Mischief. Some of that is true. I mean, it's been validated. Apparently, his family acknowledged that he did something, but maybe the videos have been AI maneuvered because all of a sudden logos that say Toyota are missing out of them.
Well, even if we presume that it's all legit,
legit,
it's
it's
not,
still
it has no impact on whether or not they
except
had
for
it.
this.
Right.
If it was legit, then it becomes premeditated where they were going after the guy.
Yeah. The other part of that is
That's what happens. It's like, okay, you want it to be that?
All right.
Then you targeted
You just made
him.
it worse.
You waited until somebody saw
Yeah.
that guy sitting on the other side of the street because you were on this side for 10 minutes.
It's probably
somebody recognized him, and then you went smack.
It's
That's
probably
not good.
It's probably likely that he kicked that taillight out, and that was a crime, and that was destruction of property. But it's not an offense for which you execute somebody. For.
I mean, the other thing is that even assuming for argument's sake, and I believe that he did that, I think that they've admitted that, for an officer to take that into account in using deadly force, he would have to know about it at the time.
Probably not the same officer.
And they didn't know about it at the time, and it's just something that is piled on. The law doesn't allow us, or even an officer who is in a circumstance like that, or even a citizen, to just imagine things. It's a reasonable officer in the circumstance. Self-defense requires, if you have a bad reputation and somebody shoots you and they say it in self-defense, and then you can't go back and, as all defense attorneys and investigators do, find about the victim, whether he's a person that is a bad person. If the person that shoots that person in self-defense doesn't know about that, it can't be used to show this guy's a bad guy, so as a bad guy we can shoot him when we learn about it
I
afterwards.
have to ask you a question. I don't know that when you investigate a scene like that, are you doing it independently of the police force, or they've given you independence to come up with anything that you find, or are hired by an attorney or something? Or
in a normal situation, which that is not, like let's say we had a shooting here in Salt Lake City, there's a lot of factors that need to be considered and a lot of things that are going to happen. There's going to be at least 3 investigations, probably 4. One's going to be a criminal investigation related to the person who was shot. What did they do that made police officer think that he needed to shoot him, right? So there's going to be an investigation into him, but done by a different group. And it's usually the venue agency, wherever the jurisdiction is that it occurred in. Then there's going to be an investigation of the police officer. And that's going to be a criminal investigation as well, into what his conduct was, into why he behaved and acted the way he did.
And also his background, to a degree.
His background will be looked at as well. I mean, if the other investigations included are if he happens to be out of his own jurisdiction where the shooting occurred, or whether he's in his own jurisdiction, there's going to be an administrative investigation to see if he was within policy. So that's a different investigation. So there's 3 investigations. There may be a subsequent investigation as to civil liability from just a private party who was damaged. So there's at least 3 and probably 4 investigations that are going to occur.
So you're Columbo, and you walk upon the scene, and there's a body over there and one on the ground. These are 2 different murders. I'm talking about Good in the car and Pretty on the street. What's the first thing you start to do to assess what happened? I mean,
well, you separate
physical evidence and that kind of. What are you doing?
The first thing you're doing is you've got to preserve the scene.
Okay, did that occur?
You got to protect it. I didn't see anything, but I haven't looked for it. Then you have to separate your witnesses. You don't want the same story being told from 10 people because they're all contaminated with each other's statements. So you've got, even if they're police, they've got to be separated. You've got to take the shooting officers, and they you take their firearms from them. They need to be secured because they're going to need to examine them and ballistically examine them and to compare them with any bullets that can be found or casings or anything else. Determine how many rounds each officer shot and that kind of thing, and where their shots went. All those things need to be looked at.
Right.
But then usually the witnesses are taken away from the scene to a police department and separated and interviewed one at a time. There may be a group of guys there doing those interviews so that they don't have to wait till the
Yeah.
But so that's generally how it would unfold. And then when you gather and collect all of the information and put it into reports, hopefully you're recording every statement so that you're not relying on your memory for things or your notes. And then there's in this jurisdiction there ultimately is a what would be a screening committee meeting with the district attorney where there's a presentation of all the facts. And then the attorneys will make the decision as to whether or not it was justified.
Well, one of the things also that when you come in, so this is an outside agency that is involved in these shootings. And that the investigation of it generally is done by the local police authority.
Yeah, so there's a problem that exists even here when there's a federal versus state certified police officer. If you have a federal agency involved in a local jurisdiction in a shooting, then you have less control over what happens, and that's probably pretty much across the board.
Meaning the local does. But notwithstanding that, the local people have to be involved or should be involved. I'm asking this question, but I'm making a statement about it. Because they also have, the scene has to be preserved. So just because it's a federal agency, you don't get to whisk the officers away with no one. For example, if you're claiming that you felt that you were attacked as a defense attorney, I want to know, well, what did you find on their uniform? Did you take their uniform off? Did you preserve that type of evidence? If you feel as though you have the power as a federal agency to go, hell with you guys, we're just picking them up, which is what happened here. We're taking them. Good luck on what we do with physical and other type of evidence. Or also, it's an old phrase from evidence, excited utterances that they may make, what they say. We need to record that. Why? Because operating under the guise of what just had occurred, people will say things, and quite often they are the most truthful statements that were said. For example, God, I'm sorry I shot that guy, shouldn't have shot him, or whatever, or the son of a bitch deserved it, or whatever. We don't have any of that in these cases because the federal government...
We do. We have the one on recording saying fucking bitch.
Well, just wait a minute. All right.
Sorry.
But we don't have a line from the shooting with these officers to know what they said or what was done by what is the local agency that is generally has to do the investigation. And what troubles me about this is this. This is indicative, in my experience, of people that are more than happy to hide stuff because they whisk them away from the scene. They don't do a good investigation on the scene themselves. They're not looking for evidence of proof of what really happened. They're looking to move away.
Well,
and that's the thing that troubles me as a citizen, as a lawyer, the most, because that's where innocent people do get pilloried in the press and by certain government agencies, and where citizens jump to conclusions about the deceased being a bad guy or the officer being a bad guy. That's why when you get to this stuff, it seems to me, it's why good officers, you call in a Craig Watson to go, here's how we're doing this. Everybody do this. I want the scene protected. They do it, videotape the scene, videotape the officer, do all of these things. I've done enough of these cases to know how it works. And then you have all of that. Then you can reflect on what the evidence is. If you don't care, you do what ICE does in all these instances. That's get everybody out of there. We'll take care of it. We're glad the son of a bitch was shot. That's it.
Or clap, as one guy did when Preddy was dying on the street. He clapped.
So
I mean, this is not the police man woman that I grew up with doing this. It's a abhorrent behavior, and I can't really I can't adjudicate the two to say that they're the same. They're not the same. Good cops, good attorneys, good investigators, good citizens are being marginalized by this violence that's taking place that never needed to be there, and it's being accoladed. People are actually cheering the way that they behaved, these people, these ICE agents behaved in Minneapolis and are behaving. And it's just,
I think
did you see anything in either of those videos that would have said, we don't, they don't have a good case?
They don't have a good case being
the ICE. I mean,
ICE, yeah. So I don't see any obvious cause for justification for what happened.
Okay.
And there's clearly no justification for the two officers as they're shooting at the guy laying there dying when they should be there offering some kind of medical intervention. Instead, they're shooting at him. That I don't have any explanation for that. Maybe they're going to try to come up with something. I'd be interested to see what it is. But when you got a guy that's already been shot 3 times, at
6 or 7 more shots fired.
Within, I doubt they missed because they were only about a foot away from him. And I think in this, and going back to your original question on this, and then there's something else I want to cover, but in jurisdictional differences between the feds and the locals, the local jurisdiction has a potential crime that just occurred in their jurisdiction.
Right.
So they have all the local state authority they need to process and investigate that crime scene. And most of the time, in every case I've ever had, that's not a problem with the feds, whether it's the FBI, the DEA, or any other federal law enforcement agency. They're like, and the U.S. Marshals. I've investigated cases where U.S. Marshals were involved in shooting. But they're usually cooperative. They're usually, okay, fine, you can look at the scene, it's your scene, but we're taking our guy, and you may or may not be able to interview him. There is a policy, a federal policy from the Justice Department that requires permission from Washington, D.C. for an officer to give a statement.
But that doesn't mean that you as a police officer wouldn't say, but we've got to preserve the evidence.
Right.
But
they may not give you his gun.
But the expectation is that it will be preserved.
Right.
Because they respect you as an officer too.
Absolutely.
And they know you have a job to do. And they know that at some point there may be some smart ass, maybe even knowledgeable defense attorney that's going to be asking questions about it. And it's one of those deals that in my experience is, because having dealt with these cases, that there is cooperation, even if it's a different agency. That doesn't happen with ICE. And that's why the dynamic of ICE and what's going on, my opinion, disagree with me if you feel, is that they're not operating as a law enforcement agency.
I agree.
And that's the big deal.
They're not operating as one should.
And they're not doing that because this is something they don't care about.
Well,
they have an officer that sits in a car and a citizen approaches him, and the officer says, don't raise your voice to me or I'll erase you.
Raise your voice, erase your voice.
And I'll erase your voice. And you go, well, I think if that happened and that video was out there and that officer was a Salt Lake City cop, a county sheriff, a unified police officer, I have a feeling that the next thing that you would read about that with that officer is that they were fired or that they were given days with retraining or something like that. We don't even know what happens with that guy.
Here's where
because it doesn't matter to them, because they're not there for law enforcement. They're there for a show primarily. That's my opinion.
Well, if you had a local police shooting here in Salt Lake County, and within 20 minutes of the shooting, Sim Gill was on the news media saying, this is justified shooting.
Yeah.
That guy was there to hurt the police.
Right.
They had every reason they needed to kill him. How much trust would you have in the investigation that followed?
Well, you wouldn't.
Yeah. And there would be zero.
And
the conclusions and the outcome was predetermined.
But cops, I mean, again, this is, I mean, you know how much respect I have for you. I know you. And I know a lot of great cops like you. I can't sense that most law enforcement officers, in Utah, you're a Category 1 peace officer. Used that in cross-examination my whole career. You're not a police officer. You're a Category 1 peace officer. You're here to protect the peace and not abuse the peace. Yes, you're right. You're here to follow up on the evidence because you don't want an innocent person convicted, and you want to make sure a guilty officer is convicted. Standard questions I ask the cops. They have to say yes. There's no problem. They say no to that, you're winning. Mm-hmm. We don't do that with ICE. And so the people that are listening to us, this isn't how it works. And that's one of the reasons Craig's here. And that's my opinion. But I get that opinion because I've worked with really good police officers and former police officers like you who really believed in the law. And as I see this, I can't help but believe, even though many may be quiet, and you've been kind enough to come here, that's not what real cops believe. It's not what police officers believe. I can't believe that they do. That's how you act.
Well, I hope that they feel like their reputation's being damaged by the way that the ICE is conducting themselves. And I say conducting themselves, but I think we're in an environment now where they're trying to recruit anybody to be a Border Patrol or ICE agent because they're trying to hire tens of thousands of them.
47 days later, you can be...
Yeah, they're not...
And there's bounties. Did you know that? There's like a $50,000 something to sign up, but you don't get it at once.
Yeah, they want to keep you around.
Yeah, there's a catch.
Yeah. It's included in your pay, I
but,
guess.
you know, like when I was younger, and I like to believe that the police officers I've always known don't say, raise your voice, erase your voice. And yet I come up in an era where some of the cops I knew, they weren't violent, but, you know, you just didn't give me shit either, you know, and that's the fear part. But they weren't, you know, mutilating people, but they were firm, and maybe firm in that era had a different kind of way of, you know,
and there were some of them that way that got theirs too.
Yeah, it went both ways. But like, I just think that ICE is beyond the pale, and that our local guys are paying the price for that. And one of these days, you know, more and more people will come forward with a voice and say, you know, we're not that cop. In fact, they're not cops. We're the police.
Right.
And they are not. That's an agency instilled to do ABC, and it's not American. It's not local. It's not fair. It's not just. You know,
well, I've got
God, I remember, don't you remember? I mean, cops used to pull you over, and I can validate this, and if you'd had a drink too many, they'd say, let me follow you home. Mm-hmm. You know, and well, I understand why you don't do that, but there was that time.
Well, I've done it.
Huh?
I've done that.
You know, I'll follow you home, and then somebody, of course, went and got their car keys and drove and hurt somebody, and there goes that one. Mm-hmm. But the fact was that they were trying to help. They understood. And now it's harder and harder.
There's a lot of discretion with every police officer. There's discretion throughout the criminal justice system, from top to bottom. But there's discretion with individual officers. You know,
there's more discretion with officers than
how they make arrests, when they make arrests, what they want to do with the arrest, whether they should make an arrest, whether they have to arrest, or whether they just want somebody to show up in jail, and those type of things. Right? I mean, that's part of what being a good officer is. It seems to me, and it's always seemed to me, is they're showing correct judgment at the time. And it's judgment without grievance, okay? The person you're arresting or the person you're investigating may really piss you off, but being a good cop is doing it without grievance. And this is going to get to a question I have for you, John. So if you have power and all you operate on is grievance, it not only happens vis-a-vis the law, where you're telling people, you know, go do this, I want you to do it this way, or you're mad and you go, I'm going to arrest them on Christmas Eve at their Christmas Eve party when I could wait until Sunday. But that comes from the top, and I think that attitude comes from the top. So first to you, John, that happens in journalism today, right?
You talk about coming after journalists?
Yeah, I'm just talking about an attitude that says, I have a grievance with you. So tell a little bit about that, and then I want to go back to Craig.
As a journalist, if I have a grievance?
No, as somebody that has a grievance against you as a journalist.
Well, first, most people will do the right thing and call up and call me an asshole, or call a journalist an asshole, write a letter. Pretty civil. You know, the same newspaper media outlet that said something of a grievous nature can also be the same medium that they can have a retort in, letters to the editor, for instance, or whatever, corrections, and seldom are they done.
But I'm going specifically to Donald Trump here.
Well, look, he like the authoritarian playbook that he's always played by, you start to eliminate certain voices right away and eliminate certain barriers of decency. Trust in journalism, trust in the truth is right up at the top. Comics are right up there because they're so pinpoint accurate about the things they say. They're funny, but they're also scary. You are in the world of law. And so you start to deteriorate the boundaries of what's lawful and what's good and what's decent. Your boundaries are torn and the policeman's are. And it starts at the top. But one guy can't do it alone. This is the thing. So Donald Trump, yes, he is the guy that quietly endorses the fact that Don Lemon got his comeuppance. Because he's a journalist that asked some questions. He entered a church legally. He wasn't fomenting a riot in that church in any way, shape, or form. That's not what Pam Bondi says. And that's what's bullshit, because now Pam Bondi's out there talking to people, making it the case, and people believe it. You need the rest of the people who are willingly believing this. You need the guy that's in the butcher shop that had nothing to do with the Buchenwald, ovens and killing people in the concentration camps and pretending like he didn't know what was going on, but he did, because he was silent. And Trump has a lot of people who are silent around him, who endorse him, and he has a lot of silent people who are unwilling to fight against this dishonor that they put on many of our individuals.
But I want to go directly to the threats he makes against
Yes,
individuals.
he did. He had hang the journalists, hit their head harder on the corridor when you put them inside, all that kind of stuff. He makes that threat, and then let me ask you something. And I've never seen Donald Trump, do an arm wrestle. So he's always had somebody else do his bidding. And that's also dangerous, because now somebody else gets to enact a fantasy, and they can be chummy in their mind with, like, see what I'm doing, what the boss said. And it's danger. And Will Robinson, this is not good. Don Lemon is just one of what's going to probably be many others. And forget the fact, this is a fact. In Baltimore, at a paper in Baltimore, I think it was during the Trump admin, could be wrong, but it was in this era of distrust of journalists. 5 journalists were murdered inside of that Baltimore newspaper. It was 5. This wasn't very long ago. It wasn't where your brother worked, but it was in Baltimore newspaper. The brother of one of them is Carl Hiaasen, who's a fantastic writer based in Florida, who writes on Florida stuff. But they're coming after journalists. We've had threats. For years we've had threats, but, and not the kind I want to talk about here.
Okay, so I want to bring you to Donald Trump, and then I'm going to go to Craig. Donald Trump also threatens people publicly that are journalists.
Yes.
Okay, give us an example of that.
Caitlin Collins.
Okay, tell us a little bit about that.
Well, she stood up yesterday, and she's done this before. Caitlin Collins asked a simple question regarding the Epstein files, to the effect of, what do you have to say about the victims of the Epstein something? I don't want to paraphrase her question. Don't want to get it wrong. It was the reaction that was wrong. So what Donald Trump said, who are you with? Basically, he does that all the time to females. It's you again. You don't smile enough. You are an angry person. You just asked the mean questions. You're only mean. There's nothing in there. I've been absolved. You should be ashamed of yourself. CNN is going down the tubes thanks to people like you. They're worth nothing. He's demeaning everything. It's all for show. Meanwhile, CNN's also the same station that came out and, buttered his bread on a different story. He's only doing this for show. And he does it for whatever reason that gives that Donald Trump is a very, very good communicator. Don't take that away from him for 5 seconds. He knows exactly the buttons to push when it comes to social media, when it comes to promoting his brand, and his brand is that. You're fired.
Yeah, I get that.
You're fired. Mm-hmm. That's what half of America believes in Donald Trump. He's a great businessman because he was a broken, bankrupt businessman that they promoted into a TV show. And all he had to do to build a persona was say, you're fired. That's what he did to Caitlin yesterday.
So
he's just being Donald, and that's what they like about Donald.
Well, forget what they like. It's his purpose, and it's his purpose.
It's scary. For journalists, it's a scary proposition. And they didn't back her up. Everybody else in that room did not back her up. And most of the people in that room are hand-picked journalists to ask softball questions of Donald Trump on the next time. Hey, gosh, you got nice-looking hair, Don. Who's your barber?
Well, I don't think it's that nice-looking. His point, what Donald Trump is doing, is I'm threatening you.
Yes.
I've got more power than you.
Yes,
I'm threatening you. Do you have courage enough to stand up to me? And you just said it. In the old days, the next question would have been the same as hers.
Somebody
Dan,
would have said,
set
by the
up.
way, you didn't answer that question.
Question
Before I go to
one.
my question about your hair, I'd like to know what you have to say about the victims in the Epstein files.
So I'm going to go to Craig and then come back to you, and then we're going to conclude here. So the same thing with police officers, I'm asking. Certainly it's the case with lawyers in law schools. We don't hear anything from lawyers in law schools in this country, not even my own law school, about what's going on with the destruction of our idea of the rule of law. We don't. They're afraid to stand up. What about cops? So you see him do this stuff with other people and how he calls people out, how he calls out the Minneapolis police chief and the mayor of Minneapolis. As cops, does that have an impact on how you might react, or how the superiors, how the command may react if ICE is involved in doing this stuff, do you think?
I think it does with some, but not all. A lot of them are. You and I were talking on the way over here. A lot of groups of folks are uninformed about what's going on. They hear tidbits and things and maybe watch the news a little, but to be deeply involved in understanding how it impacts them, maybe not so keen on that.
Now I'm gonna finish with the statement and then go back to you, because I want you to talk about what people can do to support journalism. Here's what I think that we can do to support cops. I was involved because I marched in the last two ICE marches, and was at the tag end at the Capitol on the one that was just the other day, and there weren't a lot of people. They were mainly young people, and then I stayed at the Capitol while they did a little bit of their rally. 4 of those people were arrested, and I'm going to take this a place that people may be surprised. 4 of those people were arrested, and I talked to the guy that appeared to be the commander at the Capitol, because for this small protest, there must have been 30 police officers up there just standing around. And I know some of those guys, and this young highway patrolman was standing by 2 other police officers, one of whom I've known and said hello to. So I asked him, I said to him, "Officer, can I ask you a question?" He goes, "Sure." I said, "Why are there so many of you here? I come to the rallies up here all the time. When there are Trump people racing up and down North Temple, we never see any police. Maybe a couple of you. There are 30 at least of you." And then ultimately, when I walked the dog, they were all over. And he said, "I'll tell you why. We've tried to get this particular group to just ask for a permit. They can have it. They said to go pound sand. So we don't know what they're going to do." And you know what? I thought, okay, fair enough. 4 of them got arrested. Why did they get arrested? They refused to march on the sidewalk. They had to walk in the middle of the road. It's during traffic. They get arrested. Bad kids? No. And they were kids. Anybody under 40 is a kid to me, but they were kids. And you go, you know what we can do as citizens? We can also honor the police. They got a difficult job. And so you want to be a martyr, you can be a martyr, but be a martyr for the right reason. And so that the police, they don't want to arrest you. Most of them don't. Those folks don't. You don't have to do that with every cop if you're protesting an ICE. You don't have to do it. That's my one point. My second point is, I believe that journalism is the salvation, because it's the First Amendment, to all of this stuff. So what can people do that listen to this program to support journalism and the problems that we see with the lack of support for somebody like Caitlin Collins, who, by the way, she's tough as nails.
Yeah, and I don't think she's even a Democrat, so that's the best part of it. So, number one is, City Weekly's been around a long time. This podcast is new, but both can use sustenance, right? There are bills to pay. But especially City Weekly, if you feel the feel some compunction to just pick up your pen and write a check to City Weekly for a donation to the editorial department for local independent journalism, please do so. You can go to the website on City Weekly, become a sustainer, and it comes with little bitty prizes like, hey, if you donate, you get some beer passes and, the things we do. But this is a time when the economics of journalism has changed to such a degree that even advertisers sometimes are afraid to be affiliated with certain adjacencies, like things we may or may not write. We're not even that controversial, frankly. But we do a lot of great investigative journalism.
Right.
It doesn't always have to be, the really, really tough stuff, but it's stuff that nobody else is really covering, and we want that independent voice to stay alive. And that comes at, we can't do it for free forever. We hand out a free paper for 40 years and still do, but there's a cost. And then, so if the community can lend up and buck up a little bit and offset some of that cost, it's more than welcome. And besides, I'll just as an aside, because it made me think of it, one of our cover stories that we did years ago was a band of people who walked out of the Club Cabana. This was a cover story. And walked out of the Club Cabana, walked around the block with a bunch of kazoos, and it was St. Patrick's Day, and they were dressed in green, and Don McGivney led the charge and has people to work there. And they all got threatened with arrest because they didn't have a permit for a parade. That, because they did go get a permit for the next year, and Don was getting ready to get hauled to jail. They're going, hey, you can't blow your kazoos in the middle of the street. I'll show you. Blarney Stone, he was a big, funny Irishman, and a very larger-than-life character guy. But then he got a permit the next year, and guess what is the largest parade of the type in Utah now is the St. Patrick's Day Parade. Yeah. So there is a method to do it. Protect and serve has its boundaries too. You can't expect anyone to protect and serve if you also disrespect them. That word has to be there. So, bad cops, separate the wheat and the chaff, separate the cream and the milk, whatever you need to do. You can't mix them together and just blindly say all are bad. And I've never believed that you could. So let me ask you something. Do you remember any cops in Bingham?
I remember Boyd Householder's father, Jack.
There was Jack Householder. He lived a few houses from me.
Yeah, Boyd Householder was my Little League coach. Jesse
Lopez was the last cop in Bingham.
Last cop in Bingham.
In between Benny Contrado, forget how you say it. Sonny Robertson, who played for the Cubs. Yeah. He wasn't a cop in Bingham, but he was a county sheriff.
You worked with him.
I did.
Yeah. What kind of guy was he?
He was an interesting guy.
He was an old style policeman.
He was old style.
He was old style. Him and Chuck Christensen.
Oh yeah.
If you remember Chuck?
I remember Chuck.
Those guys, I loved hanging out with those guys.
You knew where you stood with
somebody.
And Billy, his son Billy's a cop now too, county sheriff.
Paul LaBounty and
Paul LaBounty was there for. He was a neighbor of mine.
And also, I'm trying to. Well, they were kind of the Pete Hayward kind of cops.
Beckstead was a cop out there,
and Beckstead, he was the county sheriff. But so we'll end with that, and with one other thing, just one thing, and then John, you get the last word. When I talk about the protesters getting arrested and that we got to respect the police, having defended dozens and dozens of protest cases, and also having been involved in kind of giving advice on these things, there may be a time when you have to break a rule and you're doing it on purpose because that's part of the protest. But I am committed to this, and it goes back to Martin Luther King and Mahatma Gandhi. You can do it in a peaceful way and a respectful way with the police. Because just as cops lose respect when one of them is a prick, okay? You hurt the movement, if it's a peaceful movement, by reacting with hate and anger to police officers that are just trying to do their job. And that's my point. It's really pretty simple in some ways, and it's hard. It's hard. As a person that suffers from terminal easy-to-anger syndrome myself, if you're representing the police by being a cop, or you're representing protesters in a peaceful protest, then act that way. And you might be surprised that you win some hearts on the other. John, you've got the last word.
Where's the word police? How do you say it in Italian or Croatian?
Polizia.
Polizia.
And actually in Croatian it's similar.
Well, you see that in all the Monty Python movies and stuff. The polizia are coming, right?
Yeah.
But in Greece, it's not the same word, but there's a root there that's similar. The word polis, P-O-L-I-S.
It's city.
City.
Yeah.
So the word for policeman is not used that way in Greek. It's astynomia. There's a different word for city. So it means like the law of the city. It's more like a word like more, and so is police, like more community than saying a physical city. It means it's part of us.
Yeah.
That's
Yeah.
what, when you broadly say it in the way that the Greeks say it, yeah, they're wearing a uniform. It says astynomia on the back, but community, it's law of the city.
Yeah.
And not like something like foreboding or something cracking on your head or anything like that. And it's us. We must have that.
Yeah,
and we must have sanity to that.
The Latin word won't come to me, but it's a similar, and it basically means, come on, Ron. It basically means your habit of living, in a way. You know, who you are, what our modus operandi is as a people, and that's cool, because for there to be a civilization, it requires people to respect the law, attempt to change the law respectfully if that needs to be, but it also requires them to participate in making certain that everything is done in accordance with the manner in which your civilization works, your polis works, your city works, your state, your government. Whenever that gets out of balance, that is when we've got to be afraid. And we're out of balance in this country. And that's why we should be afraid. You want to finish?
I want to thank Craig, and you worked alongside a couple of my close friends and relatives, so we'll talk about that in a second. But man, the thing is whenever you meet someone like who you had a long association with here, I knew what to expect primarily because I trust what Ron is where his history has been, and you coming in here just validated that there are tremendous amount of good people out there that actually think the right thoughts and behave the right ways because they have a core belief of right and wrong and up and morality, ethics. I know you possess that. It's in your face. It's all over it, and people can't see that. But the fella sitting next to me now you could just know is an honest and good person. There's no bullshit in your disguise. You take your glasses off, you're going to be the same good person. Mm-hmm. And I want to compliment you because you were so level-headed and the way you made your points today of anything. And so that's always good. And I would just say that in this case, that maybe you tell more people that it's okay to speak out, and more people hear us and say it's okay, because it's not protesting to use your voice. It's not anti-government to use your voice. It's not like, crazy libtards who want to destroy America use your voice. It's what I think is ironic here. It's common sense.
Right.
And the funny why I say that in a joking way is because a lot in the past year, I've seen that. In fact, I heard on the news again last night, somebody advocating for a right-wing position that was not common sense at all, used the term, it's just common sense. And I go, you know what? I'm tired of some of these words and usages in American language, English terms that have been usurped.
Right.
And are used wrongly. It is not common sense to send, an army into a cold city and start whacking people. It isn't. Under any pretext, let alone the bullshit story of, come on, go after the criminals. You haven't done that yet.
I'll tell you.
Anyway, thank you so much for being here.
The visible point of that is really quick. Take a look at the little picture of the little boy.
Yeah, the 5-year-old kid that they finally got reunited, right?
Yeah.
That one?
Yeah, they're out now. Him and his dad are out. Anyway, Craig, thanks, man.
Yeah.
You're great.
Thanks for
Take a minute, say whatever you want to say.
Yeah, if you want to add
bullshit
anything.
and people.
The only observation I would make out of everything that we just said, and particularly towards the end, is when folks are out because they're upset about things that are going on, like ICE in Minneapolis or any other governmental operation that's struck a nerve. I think when they come out in big groups, they have a tendency to be targeting their emotions towards authority.
Right.
And the only authority around is the guys there who are supposed to keep the peace. So they target them.
Right.
And it's a natural response, but it's one they need to be aware of.
Right. I think that's right. We'll end on that.
Maybe we shouldn't name our strongest nuclear weapons peacekeepers.
Yeah, right.
Exactly. All right.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye from Clark Street, 2122 Clark Street. Come in and pick up your free beers.
Peace and love, everybody. We'll talk to you next week.